consistent vision is you have to have a North Star in a way. You need to say, I want my company to be able to deliver this kind of value to clients. I want my company to have that force of that kind of culture, this culture that I believe in and I like. While you need to adapt all the time to changes, that ultimate destination should never, ever, ever change.
Hello and welcome to the Care to Lead interview series. We are so excited today to have Christophe Jouan, who is CEO and co-owner of Foresight Factory. He's a pioneer of new consumer analytics and prediction and data techniques, and he has done some amazing things. He was part of my Authority Magazine interview series, and his article resonated with me so much that I wanted to bring him on to share more and get to know him a little bit better. So welcome, Christophe.
Thank you very much. Hello, Cynthia. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, we're excited to have you. You talked a little bit about how your company helped businesses kind of learn to adapt during and after the COVID pandemic. Would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Yes, of course. So as you can imagine, when COVID hit, there was a period, quite short actually, I would say about 3 months, where no one was doing anything. Business dried up. But very quickly, companies became very interested in post-COVID. Okay? We're going to manage while COVID is happening, but what is the world going to look like post-COVID? And this is where we as a company had to adapt very quickly to then be able to help companies with their plans after the crisis. So that's what happened. So we ended up, after a very short period of inactivity, as I said, about 3 months, we ended up being extremely, extremely busy with lots of clients during and after this period.
Christophe, tell us a little bit more about Foresight and what you do.
Yes. So Foresight, or I would actually say strategic foresight, is on the one hand being prepared for short and long-term changes in consumer attitudes, behaviors, needs, and so on. So that's a starting point. This is helping companies being customer-centric. Beyond that, it's also equipping companies with all the signals and only the right signals that they need to take into account. That can be consumer, but can be outside of the consumer. So they have a set of signals they can monitor to be able to react accordingly. So that's in a way, that's what I would call the inputs. Then you have to create a strategy or adapt your strategy based on that, and then execute the strategy and review the strategy permanently as signals, evolve in some way. So that's what it is. So on the one hand, you've got foresight itself, which is being able to not necessarily to see the future, but be able to anticipate what it might or might not be like. In some cases, you can shape it, but then what really matters is what you do with it. So it's working on a long-term basis with organizations to help them transform in the right way.
So what about the signals? Tell me more about, what does a signal look like to you? What do you consider a signal?
A signal can be simply a trend, that a trend we know exists, is evolving or not. It could be a weak signal, something we're beginning to see, but we're not yet very sure whether it's going to translate into something bigger, whether how it's going to move, and any other types of forces that will affect change. So it could be the economy, it could be the price of some particular material, it could be geopolitical changes, it could be anything really. The one thing that matters is choosing signals that, first of all, have some shelf life, and also selecting the right signals for the company and for its strategy, because you could choose anything. So that's basically the prioritization is what really matters the most.
Can you give me an example of any of the signals that you've seen and were able to give to a company to change their strategy?
There are
So many.
loads of them. I'm going to take an example that is not a recent one, but has changed quite a lot. When you were 10, 15 years ago, you were talking to people and they would basically tell you that, yes, they love risks. And actually, we started observing that the very definition of risk changed, and actually people became totally adverse to risk. And we were the first ones really to define what we called at the time, and is still valid, the death of risk, and how companies need to shape product services. So it's particularly relevant in the travel industry, of course, and how to create the illusion and managed risk. So that's an example. It's a consumer example. But it could be absolutely anything. It could be the price of semiconductors. It could be absolutely anything.
Interesting. So you bring up a good topic, because I do want to kind of transition a little bit into leadership, but risk is a problem in a lot of organizations in leadership as well, because they will promote themselves. Leaders will say, we want you to take risk. We want you to go out there and help our company grow and take chances. And yet when you do and you mess up, it's a bad thing. So you can't lead in a way that says, take a risk, and yet we're going to penalize you if you're not successful. So how do you speak to that as a leader?
So there's degrees of risk. First of all, it's not one or not. It's not binary. And what really matters is informed risk. And this is where, once again, signal strategic foresight comes into the equation. Is you really, by doing it, you really reduce the level of risk. Beyond that, and I can now speak not as somebody providing services, but as a leader, is you're going to take risks, you're going to try things, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work for a number of reasons. And as long as it's not putting the whole of the organization into jeopardy, risks and therefore mistakes are completely normal and part of what a company should be doing if the company is ambitious. And it's all about, to me, it's not about making mistakes. It's an obvious thing I'm saying, but it's not about making mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We make small mistakes every day. Even the way I've uttered the last sentence, I could have done it better, if you know what I mean. So, nothing is ever perfect. What really matters is to learn from it, not to make the same mistake again, and to learn from the mistake to do something better in the future. So absolutely, I will never penalize someone for making a mistake. When it becomes problematic, as I said, is when the mistake is reproduced again and again and again. It becomes unsustainable.
Absolutely. You, in your article, mentioned 3 character traits: adaptability, consistent vision, and collaboration. Let's unpack those a little bit and talk about how you implement those characteristics into your leadership.
Yes. So consistent vision is you have to have a North Star in a way. You need to say, I want my company to be able to deliver this kind of value to clients. I want my company to have that force of that kind of culture, this culture that I believe in and I like. And while you need to adapt all the time to changes, that ultimate destination should never, ever, ever change, unless you realize at some point that was, an absolutely terrible mistake. But that's really very rarely the case, because in a way you choose the kind of organization you want to have. So having that single-minded view of where you want to go is very, very important. And not being, for example, distracted by competition. It doesn't mean you need to be totally aware of competition, but it shouldn't deviate. You should not deviate from your ultimate goal. Adaptability is, well, it's a given, especially the world we live in. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Gen AI was really, in a way, a curveball for absolutely everyone. So adaptability is very important. And finally, collaboration. So collaboration is absolutely, absolutely key. In my organization, absolutely everyone has a voice, has an equal voice. What I mean by that, it's not a completely flat structure with a complete democracy, but everybody is as allowed a point of view as I am. Everyone is allowed to challenge. And the whole thing about it is listening. It's simply about listening. And that is probably to me the most important aspect of leadership.
So how is your company, where are you based and how many employees do you have? And are they remote or are they in office? And how does that play into how you lead?
So there are 63 of us as of yesterday. And we have an office in London. Now we have an office in London and an office in New York. However, most of us live and far away from offices and work either completely remotely or partly remotely. That's how it is. So we have people in Canada. We have someone in Estonia. I lived in London and New York for a little while, but I lived in London for 30 years, but now I live in the south of France. So of course I travel to the UK. So it doesn't really matter to us where people live, where people work. What matters is the qualities in people that means that they're going to, even though it can be extremely diverse, but the qualities that mean that they can work in collaboration with colleagues, that they're going to listen to colleagues, probably, and maybe disagree, doesn't matter, but these are the qualities we're looking for. Yeah. So we've got people all over the place. I said 63 because it happens we've just recruited someone who is based in South Africa.
Mm-hmm. So I love that. And as a leadership coach, I'm 100% in agreement that remote teams can be effective. And I also believe that there is an opportunity sometimes to try to do more to collaborate those teams, to get them to know each other better, that you can only do in person. They're just relationship-wise, it's challenging. And I say that as someone who's been doing Zoom. I was doing Zoom way before it was cool and everyone else was doing Zoom because I've been doing this for 13 years now. So when COVID hit and everyone else got on my platform, it was, everyone else started doing it. So I know you can build relationships. I know that you can build teams. I'm well aware of that. But how often and what do you do as an organization to bring that sense of unity, that sense of team collaboration and personal connection to the table when you are so remote?
So you're absolutely right. Remote working works, but you need these moments of physical presence and unity. So apart from a few of us really working remotely, and I'll come back to this minority, most people go to the office a couple of days a week. So people meet and interact anyway. And on a regular basis, like we had yesterday, absolutely everybody comes to the office for a day. We have a company meeting. We've got series of meetings. We've got company outing. We went for drinks. We went for a meal. And all these things are super important. So you're absolutely right. You need a mix. And as for those like me who, my office is 1,000 miles from my home, basically it means I go to London every month. Mm-hmm. So I spend time there. So you're absolutely right. It's important to have this physical presence once in a while. What I was trying to say is you don't need it on a daily basis.
Oh, agreed. 100% agreed. I think that it's funny. I read somewhere that even Zoom makes people come to the office on occasion.
Yeah, really? What do you mean?
The company of Zoom makes their employees come actually in physically to work. I don't know if that's true, but I did hear it somewhere. So that tells you something.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So you had a kind of an interesting start to your career. Would you like to share how you got started in all of this?
Well, the start to this particular career, I just fell into it by chance. I finished a master in the UK, and one of our professors recommended me to this small agency called Future Foundation. And I went there, got an interview, didn't really even completely understand what a consumer trend was. It was well before we talked about foresight or even insight. And so it was companies doing quantified, future-focused consumer trends. It sounded quite intriguing, but I wasn't even on day one, I wasn't completely sure what it was all about. But very quickly, I just loved it. I loved it. The work itself was fascinating because it was all about understanding people. Really, it's about knowing and understanding people. And you do it partly through quantitative methods. So you can look at the size of different types of thinking, different types of behavior. I love the futures element. What was interesting though is maybe quite naively to me, it was totally obvious that it was extremely beneficial to companies to really understand how the world is changing, what consumers really think and do. However, really a lot of companies, a lot of clients struggled to be able to translate these trends into, actionable strategy or whatever it might be. And there was an element of, it's interesting, but so what? It's a nice to have. And the company, so I was employed by this company, which subsequently I purchased with Mev, my business partner, who you met. And we really flipped the focus of the company from, we're not here to deliver consumer trends. Consumer trends are the bedrock of what we are doing, but it's a means to an end. What we specialize in is the translation from trends to strategy and to the execution of strategy. And then we evolved even more into a really very solid methodology for strategic foresight, whereby we now we can consider ourselves to be real foresight specialists, but also with management consultant skills in terms of delivery and relationships with clients.
So what's an ideal client for you? What types of businesses fit best with what you do?
So, well, it depends. It could be, it's going to be a large business. And there are so many industries that are in a situation now where the industry the company is in is going through massive changes. So, the automotive industry is obvious, the airline industry, airports, but also it could be anything, how people consume goods. So, even companies like Coca-Cola, for example, so it could be any type of company where the industry therein is going through a lot of change and transformation. That's number one. Number two is, it doesn't matter whether they practice foresight already or not. What really matters is that there is a real appetite from the top leadership to really take it into account. Because you'll find that having a foresight department, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that foresight has an integral place within the organization. So it's not so much a structure itself, it's the willingness from the C-suite to really transform, to be open to transformation and to take into account, more than take into account, but really adopt a foresight first culture. It's really, it's really interesting because you've got lots of companies where you talk to the CMO, for example, and they will tell you, well, I bring trends to the boardroom, but really it's to justify my strategy. It's to justify what I want to do already. So it's an afterthought. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't help anyone, really.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I find in executive coaching is, even when you have a senior leadership team or maybe the executive suite that is all on board toward change, and change is hard. It's hard for people. And right now, every industry is changing pretty much. AI is changing, disrupting everything. And the leaders themselves are still trying to figure it out. And so they don't even necessarily have the skill set as leaders to be able to navigate the change fast enough where they're able to embrace it, bring their teams on board, and keep everybody moving in the same direction. So it's like, I think right now what AI has done overall is create a new leadership challenge that requires a new set of leadership skills. Do you agree with that?
Completely. And from a personal point of view, to me, the hardest part of my job at my level within the company that is relatively small is implementing change. Because human beings, most of human beings love the idea, they love the idea of change, but they don't like changing themselves.
Right.
So, you see that all the time. And I find it, I really find this particular challenge the most difficult in my job, how to get people to really change and adapt to what's necessary and it's very hard. And so at a larger scale for big companies, it's very, very difficult. And actually a lot of what we need to do is beyond the willingness of the leadership is a prerequisite. If you don't have that, it's not going to happen. Right. But beyond that, it's working a lot with people at all levels of organizations to implement that change, to get people enthused. And that's not easy. That's not always easy.
One of the things that I always encouraged leaders to do, like when they're facing employees or teams that are resistant to the change, it's not because that employee doesn't want to change. There's part of them that wants to change. But I always tell them to imagine it like the employee is over here in box A, and box A is their comfort zone. And they feel really comfortable here, even if it's not the best place to be. It's like an uncomfortable comfort zone, right? So they're here. And box B over here is where we are after the change. And that's like this ideal place that everybody wants to be. The scary part for the people over here is this empty space between these two boxes. And that is the critical point for that leader to be able to say, I know it's scary out there, but I've got your back. We're going to do this together. Here's how it's going to be, and be able to paint a really clear vision of what box B is going to look like and what those opportunities are for the people over here. And I think if leaders can start thinking of it that way and know that it's just human nature to fear change, I can't even, I'm trying to change my kitchen and it's like this nightmare for my husband, but I like my floors. I like my countertops. Like, no, you don't. You hate it. It's old. So, I mean, you have to gradually get people to change. And I think that is something right now the leaders are excited and they want to move forward, and they almost try to force feed that change on their teams. And they're like, if you're not on board, I'll just replace my teams. That's not the way to do it. They've got to paint that picture really clearly.
Yeah. So it's interesting what you're saying, because in some cases, painting a fantastic picture of box B, as you described it, can work. I see things slightly differently. So you're absolutely right. You cannot force people, because they will pay lip service to what you're trying to do. And it's not always to me, it's not always the end goal that is going to get people enthused. It's the journey. Because first of all, you can never be guaranteed you're going to get to what you call box B, which is the ideal situation. I think what really matters is people enjoying the journey of transformation. Once you've done that, and I'm not saying it's easy, by the way, I don't have the magic formula, but to me, that's what really matters, is people saying, yes, I like the journey of transformation, even though I'm right at the beginning and it's going to be a long time, but the journey itself is worth it.
And I love that. I think that's absolutely true. And that's that blank space between box A and box B. And I think that as a leader, it's important on that journey to do like check-ins with people to say, yep, we're still on the right path. But, box B is still our direction, but sometimes it will change. Sometimes you'll get like halfway through that journey and you're going to say, well, box B that we were headed to really isn't what we thought. And we're making a shift. And that freaks out employees too. It's like, oh, we're all in this path, and then leadership changes our direction. That's called agile. That's called pivoting. That's called understanding that things are changing around us constantly. So that journey is going to be ongoing. That journey is going to have pivots, and you can't get stuck. Even when you're on a transformational journey, you can't get stuck on one path and not be willing to change.
Absolutely. But it's also why it's also important to have a North Star, where the general direction is still a general direction that everybody can understand, within which you're going to change your mind, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to pivot, you're going to do things. And I think being very transparent, explaining to people is going to be very important. So there will be a massive difference in perception between, oh, they're changing their minds, they don't know what they're doing. And okay, yeah, we're making changes, but ultimately this is where we're going.
Exactly.
You need both. You need both, yeah.
100%, which is why I said leadership today requires a whole new set of skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I would like to ask you if there are any myths or misconceptions out there about your industry as a whole that you have an opportunity right now to debunk. What do people think? What do they have wrong that you could clear up?
In terms of what people do in my industry, or in terms of the perception of the industry?
Either one, whatever one you think you'd like to speak to.
The perception of the industry, and I kind of alluded to it before, still remains for some people as, do we really need it? It's a nice thing to have, but it's not fundamental to my strategy. That is one issue. And it's there because there's something in it, which is traditionally a lot of people from my industry didn't come from, for example, management consultancies. They came from the old market research world. And so these are people who are very good. That's not the point, but the people who are more internally focused are going to focus massively on the products and maybe less on the outcomes. And I think where we probably differ from a lot of people in the industry is we have a real mix in our companies. We have very diverse mix of people, but we combine very much this kind of creation of substance with the kind of management consultant backgrounds that we have as well. The perception about the industry, which is, it's all good, but how much is it going to help me, is that bridge that we've managed to get through, really.
That's excellent. And so for any of our listeners who want to learn more about your work or how to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you? Is it website, LinkedIn, email?
LinkedIn is perfect. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's always my favorite answer, because I think people underestimate the power of the value of LinkedIn, and they'll say, go to my website, like go to LinkedIn. That's where people should be reaching out to you. It's my personal thought.
And if people want to talk to me, I think it's much more enjoyable and insightful than going through a website. Mm-hmm. I love my website, don't get me wrong, but it's never the same.
Right. And on LinkedIn, if you're a thought leader, you're consistently putting out content that if people really care about your work and want to follow your work, your website's going to be a little more static, and it's who we are and what we do. Where LinkedIn is like, here's my latest thoughts. And that's really powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Christophe, I want to thank you so much for being here. Your insights are valuable, and your article was excellent. And I really enjoyed speaking with you. And for our listeners, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to the Care to Lead interview series. If you found this episode valuable and want to stay updated on our latest interviews and insights, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel or find us on your favorite podcast platform. And we look forward to having you all join our community. Until next time, remember, leaders who care to lead. Christophe, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.